Under Kublai Khan, Mongol forces were able to not only take over the Song dynasty, but they actually advanced even further south into Vietnam. They tried to take over and attack Java, and they tried to take over and attack Sumatra. All these places are they're jungle, and so they're not really conducive for the type of warfare that the Mongolians were used to in their big open fields with their really fast horses that could quickly suck people into a bad situation. They weren't used to the type of fighting that they would see in Vietnam and Java and Sumatra. We'll talk about Japan in just a second, but they encountered the same kind of fighting that we did in our Vietnam War. And you'll see later, whenever we get to the Vietnam War, that the guerrilla tactics and so on and so forth that the Vietnamese used, and the ability to hide in the jungle, it's very difficult to get through the jungle. It's very thick, it's very dense. It's not a place that's conducive for horse travel, and so they weren't really able to morph to figure out how to. They weren't able to change their tactics well enough. They were really good at what they were good at, but the things that they were struggled at, they really had a hard time adapting to those types of situations. So they were never really able to go any further south than China, because they weren't able to get their horses to do what they were able to do in other places. So whenever you see them going into Java, you see them going to Sumatra, Vietnam, you can just kind of put it in your pocket that they were unable to fight these people for the same reasons that, the United States did not do a very good job in Vietnam, and we were unable to really distinguish between who was friend and who was foe, because you might be friend in the day and then you'd be foe at night. And same concept happened with the Mongols. Once they got into Vietnam, they figured out they weren't going to be able to use the same tactics that they had used before. We figured out that we couldn't use the same tactics as we had done before, and it was very difficult for us to do the same thing. All right, put a pin in that. We'll talk about that again whenever we get to Vietnam, and we're like later next semester. But one of the cool things that you will have heard before, and I hope that you would have heard this before, but it's kind of cool to me. So the Mongols actually also tried to invade Japan. It's not because Japan had these like amazing warriors, which they did have some pretty amazing samurai warriors and ninjas and all that kind of stuff come from Japan. It's not really about that they weren't able to invade into Japan. What happened is the Mongols built boats. They put their horses on the boats. They put their people on the boats, and great, because it's not really that far from Korea to Japan in a boat. But it didn't work. And the reason why it didn't work is because when they got on these boats, they went to go over to Japan. 2 different times, this exact same thing happened. They get over there. On their way across, they get smashed with a typhoon. A typhoon is kind of like a hurricane. It's a little bit different, but whenever they're going across in their boats, they get smashed with a typhoon both times. The Japanese refer to these as, wait for it, kamikaze winds. Kamikaze winds. So the kamikaze winds kept the Japanese safe from the Mongol invasions from the Korean peninsula. So it just seemed like a really, really good idea to go over to Japan, although Japan doesn't really have anything at this point that they produce that's worth having. They just wanted to conquer everybody they could. Basically, these, quote, kamikaze winds that you're going to hear about again when we get to World War II, they smashed the Mongols. The Mongols were just done for. They weren't able to invade, and I think they just took it as a sign that, hey, we probably don't need to be trying to invade Japan, because every time we do this, the gods or whoever keeps smashing us up against the water. Maybe we should just stick to horseback travel.